Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wander to the Edge. My name is Adam Asher from the Edge of Adventure.
Well, hi, Adam. I'm Zanne. I'm from Where Gals Wander.
Great to meet you. And what's also great is that it is already Saturday again. Saturdays just they come around so quickly, right? Almost as quickly as Mondays.
Yeah, I was going to say at least one a week.
But yeah, as always, great to be here. Great to share part of your weekend. And Zan, I know that behind the scenes, we're both kind of busy, right? But I know you are very busy with the content. You are extremely good in particular. Well, not just Instagram, but I think about all the success that Where Gals Wander has had on Instagram and how you have brought that success and that know-how over to Wander to the Edge. And what have we got? What have we got? So if you're watching this right now on Facebook or you're on YouTube, watching this on some other platform, and you haven't joined Wander to the Edge on Instagram, you need to do it. And Zan, what are they going to find?
Well, it's some behind the scenes photos or outtakes of our episodes. It's photos that we receive from our guests, kind of behind the scenes of their stories and the photos of those different adventures and events and places that they've gone. Also, you have to make sure that you check out the Instagram stories because I like to sneak stuff in there that Adam doesn't even know about. So I like to put in their little clips. I like to put in their little facts, all the stuff that, you don't really want a lot of evidence that's going to hang around for a long time for. So you got to catch them when I post them up there. So make sure you check that pretty
So
often.
no screenshotting those. Those are just meant to just
That's right.
tease you there. But yes, indeed, look us up over on Instagram at Wander to the Edge, and that the following continues to grow. It's we started this less than a year ago, and it's just great to have all the friends and the travel tribe following us there as well. So look us up on Instagram, Wander to the Edge. And Zan, we have a wonderful guest today, and this is why we do this. This is our opportunity to
Yeah.
meet new people, get to know them a little better, and share that experience with the travel tribe, so that they also get to know all the different people and where they live and where they travel, and learn a little bit about their stories. So who's up for today?
Well, I'm excited to have Riana on today from Teaspoon of Adventure. She's someone that I've been watching and following on Twitter, and she's so clever and so well traveled. And she just has these little snippets of these different adventures. And I'm like, we have to hear these stories, Adam. We have to have her on. So I am thrilled that she's going to be joining us today
Right here
on Wander
on.
to the Edge.
Riana, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you both.
Same. I want to first confirm. So where are you today? You're back in Vancouver.
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver, Canada. Have been since, the world kind of went topsy-turvy on us.
So what is Vancouver for someone who hasn't been there? What's life like? Is it a beautiful place?
It is a gorgeous place. It is best place in Canada. I'm sure not everyone would agree, but I very biasedly would say so. It's beautiful. We've got mountains, we've got the ocean, we've got a city, but it's not a huge city. It's pretty small, and you can literally go from skiing to kayaking to shopping all kind of in an afternoon. We've got great seafood. The one downside is it does rain quite a bit, but you've actually caught us on a beautifully sunny day streaming through my windows, which is very rare for us, especially in the winter and the spring. So, but when we get them, we really love them.
Riana,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, Riana, I know you've traveled all over the world. We're going to get to that, 6 continents, and I don't just mean for a couple of minutes. You've actually lived and worked and volunteered and all these things. We're going to get to that. But what is home for you? Where did you grow up?
Oh, so I was born in Vancouver, but we left and we went back to Toronto, Canada when I was about 6 months old. So Toronto, I've always sort of said Toronto is home, but like Vancouver's my blood, and that was kind of what drew me back to Vancouver. So I came back to Vancouver when I was 18 to go to university, and then sort of spent my university years and early 20s kind of hopping around, but Vancouver was always kind of the base, like between travels, I would always come back to Vancouver. And then after I met my partner here in 2015, he's also sort of Vancouver born and raised. Then Vancouver became a little bit more of a permanent home, but hasn't slowed us down too much from still hopping around the globe and finding other homes elsewhere.
So we're going to talk about the finding other homes in a moment. But first, when you first left Vancouver, you had talked about, in some of the info that I've seen, that you ran away to Vietnam. So let's go back to that. Why
Totally.
Vietnam, and how did all that happen?
Yeah, so that was in 2016. It was a big year for me, for my family. So I'll back up a little bit. So I was at that time, I was working actually back at the university where I went to school. I had gotten a job just sort of in a mid work. It paid well. It was fine. It was kind of mindless. And I was 24 at the time, if that's the right math. And just sort of really, really bored. Like I was, working this 9 to 5, fine, good benefits, paid well, but just so like soul crushingly boring every single day. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm 24, I have no debt, I don't have kids, I don't have a car, I don't have a mortgage. Like, why am I, doing this job that I hate, really? So I started to explore different avenues, different passions. Writing has always been a huge one for me. So I was sort of picking up some freelance jobs on the side. And then in that year, in 2016, at the beginning of September, my partner's father actually passed away very suddenly. He checked into the hospital with back pain, and 11 days later had passed away from cancer. So it was really just a very tumultuous time for his family, my family. I'm calling them now. We just were at the hospital that entire time, lives completely turned upside down. And it really just kind of shook me of like, whoa, like his father was early 60s, like 2 years away from retirement, had plans to, go out in the RV, see the whole country. And it really just shook me that like, wow, like, time's not guaranteed. Like we had no idea this was going to happen. And it really sort of woke me up to, okay, it's now or never. Like we need to make a change. So I turned in my notice to my job with not much of a plan. And as I often do when my life is kind of in a position of change, I say, okay, where can I go next? Where can I run away to? Where can I, just either celebrate or mourn or switch things up? So I think a flight deal jumped into my inbox for Vietnam for like $500 Canadian round trip. And I was like, yep, sounds good. I called up a girlfriend who was also kind of in a position of change. She was going from working in academia to going back to law school in another city. So she was kind of in a bit of an in-between place in her life as well. And we booked it and we decided, yep, we're going to run off to Vietnam. She did 2 weeks. I did about a month. And then when I came back, I sort of decided, okay, I'm going to go all in on this freelance writing thing, and just sort of told myself like, hey, if it doesn't work, I can always go work at a restaurant again, something I did in university. I could go be a server or a barista or something like that. But it worked out well. I've been doing content writing, social media, content management, that sort of thing ever since sort of the end of 2016, and was able to sort of eke out a full-time income from that, which has been really cool.
Riana is our guest today, right here on Wander to the Edge. And Riana, we are going to have to dig into this concept that you have here of teaspoon of adventure. I'm going to pull up your website or your blog here, but before, just my question really has to do with something in particular that I'm reading on the screen here. I'll pull it up momentarily, but it's a quote from you that says, "This is a travel blog for those who seek adventure, but not too much." Tell us about that.
Yeah, that kind of goes to the opposite of your site there, Adam. Sorry about that. I think for me, it was all of the travel blogs that I saw when I first started this blog in 2012. And it was very much just like a diary, a place for me to sort of share all my thoughts and feelings. I was feeling very restless. And then that was also the year I did my first solo trip and my first trip to Europe. So it was a way to sort of like, okay, so I don't have to email my mom and my dad and my best friend. I would just send out the link and be like, okay, here's the update. You can, see that I'm alive. But for me, I went with sort of that teaspoon of adventure and that idea of not being super adventurous, because I always thought my version of travel, the life that I live going on these trips was adventurous, but it wasn't the, overnight backpacking and camping out in the wilderness. It wasn't bungee jumping. It wasn't quit your job and travel the world for a year. And there are aspects of all of those things that I really love, but I knew that wasn't the kind of adventure that I was seeking and that was going to fit well into my life. So this is sort of a version of like, hey, this is adventure. It's adventurous to go off on these trips and to, live and work and travel all around the world, but you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to bungee jump. You don't have to like to hike. I'm notoriously not a hiker, which is sad because we've got beautiful hiking opportunities here in Vancouver. But yeah, I just sort of wanted it to appeal a little bit more to people in my boat who want to travel and have adventure, but aren't quite ready to leave everything else behind, or I don't know, train for some sort of athletic feat that it's not really my cup of tea.
I love that. And I think we have so many people on the show, like Dancing Pandas, two Dancing Pandas, and she did adventure racing, and we're allowed also adventure racing and hiking and all these other folks. And sometimes you have to find the right adventure for you, right? It's kind of like trying on clothes and seeing what fits in terms of comfort and style and just knowing this is me. And I love our travel tribe. Just we have so many people that define adventure so differently, and all the definitions are right. Everything it's the same, but it's all different.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that.
And one of the things that we can tell by looking at this particular picture that is up on the screen, which is from your website, you like to travel with your pup, with your dog.
I do, yes.
What is that like?
So that's our little dog, Ellie. She is 7 years old, a rescue dog. So she's part Chihuahua. We don't know what the other part is. She's about 13 pounds, maybe 12 on a good day. And yeah, we do a ton of traveling with her. She's very, very mobile, just being that small. She's able to go just in her carrier, and we can put her in the plane with us. Like, she doesn't have to go into the cargo hold. She's allowed to come in cabin. So I think we'll probably get to this later, but when we did move abroad to Europe, she was definitely going to be a part of that. And it was very easy to bring her. And she does have a little bit of anxiety, but it's more about being away from us. So it's actually most comfortable for her to be with us. And she adapts very quickly. Anytime we go to a hotel or an Airbnb or a train, right away she finds the comfiest spot, curls up for a nap. So she's very happy to come along on adventures.
All right, so let's talk about moving to Europe. Why don't I turn it over to you to kind of set the stage about why, and then the how. How did you make that transition? So I don't want to give anything away. So
for sure. Yeah, so this was always a dream of mine. I studied abroad in university and had always said, okay, I want to do this. I want to come back. I want to live abroad for some period of time. And then I met my partner here in Vancouver, and he works in healthcare in the hospitals. Born and raised in Vancouver, spent his whole life here. When we met, he didn't even have a passport. His passport was expired, which we always joke was like a big red flag. Like, I almost didn't say yes to the date. But slowly over our years together, we've been together just about 6 years now. The idea of travel and long-term travel and living abroad kind of started to grow on him. I think I worked him up. I was like, oh, it'd be nice if we spent like, a month. Wouldn't that be cool? We could actually see places. And what about 6 months? Oh, what about a year? Like, just sort of worked my way up. And I think as well, the passing of his father was definitely an impetus for him to want to go on these big adventures with me. So we finally agreed that, like, yes, we do. We want to do this year abroad. We want to do it before we have any more roots in Vancouver. At that point, we already had our dog. We already had an apartment that we had bought, so we had a mortgage. And it was like, okay, if we wait any longer, we're going to have, the minivan and the 3 kids and the whatever else. So we got to go now while we can. So we were originally thinking to go to the UK because they had a program where my partner could still work in the hospitals over there. But it just ended up being such a headache with the amount of paperwork needed, and it wasn't quite working out for our situation. It's also a lot harder to bring dogs over to the UK. They're not able to fly in cabin. So we would have either had to put our dog in the cargo, which we didn't think she would love, or we'd have to fly over to mainland Europe and then take like a ferry over. And the whole point of us moving to Europe for the year was really just to see as much of Europe as we could. So we definitely didn't want to bring our dog over to the UK to then, abandon her every other weekend while we go traveling, just because it would have been so difficult to bring her with us. Always have to take the ferry back. She has to go and get like an extra shot from the vet every time. So we kind of cut the UK from our list, and we began looking around mainland Europe. My partner had sort of gotten on board with the idea that he probably wouldn't be able to work in a hospital just because he only speaks English. So nobody really, wants their hospital worker not able to speak the local language. So he was kind of getting used to the idea of working in hospitality or retail or something like that for the year. And then we landed on Prague kind of accidentally. Neither of us had ever been to Prague. We'd never really thought about it. And I had just posted in a couple traveling groups on Facebook, and I said, hey, we're looking for a place that's like, a good sized city, easy travel connections, good transportation, affordable, pet friendly. And every single person was like, oh, you're describing Prague. Like, you got to go to Prague. So we tried to research it as best we could. We watched some episodes of House Hunters International to see what it would look like. And we kind of decided, okay, let's just go for it. Let's try out Prague. And sorry, I'm rambling on forever. So
no, that's fine.
Just a little bit on the how part of it. So Canada has a sort of like a bilateral relationship with actually about 30 countries around the world, where we have, they're either called youth mobility visas or working holiday visas. So it's for people between 18 and 30 or 35, and you can get a visa to go and live and work in the other country for 1 to 2 years. So they had one for the Czech Republic. So it's actually a pretty simple process compared to, I know a lot of people have to jump through many hoops to get, spousal visas or work visas or sponsorship or freelance visas, that sort of thing. It was relatively easy. We filled out a form. We printed off our bank statements, sent it to the consulate with our passports. They sent it back. It was pretty affordable. I think it was a couple $100. Very easy, pretty easy process. Yeah. And that allowed us to work and live in the Czech Republic for a year.
Riana, give us some advice for traveling internationally with a dog. I mean, it can't be automatic. What's the first thing you have to consider, look into, and plan for?
Yeah, so the first thing I did was just a ton of research. Sorry, you might be able to hear her. She's tapping around on the floor. She can tell I'm talking about her. But yeah, the first thing I did was just a ton of research into the actual legalities of how do we bring our dog? What do we need to do? So for Ellie, we had to get her a new rabies vaccination. She had to get a microchip. She had to get a health form all filled out. And this was all for the EU. And you have to fill it out. There's like a certain number, I think it's like 10 days before you arrive, but not more than 10 days. Like there's all these very specific numbers. Luckily, all the information is online and it's super up to date. And it was actually to the fact, when I went to the vet, I was like, hey, here's the form. And they're like, oh, you don't need that. And I was like, yes, I do. I went online. I know the rules. So we were kind of having to explain to the vet. And they're like, oh, I'm pretty sure you need this shot. And I was like, nope, don't need that one. Need this one. So it's funny that, the vets didn't really know. And then even when we arrived, we landed in Paris and then took the train from there to Prague. In Paris, when we arrived, I said, hey, I have my dog. Do you need to check my paperwork? And they were kind of like, maybe. And I was like, let's check it. Let's get the stamp. Let's do it. I just didn't want any problems further along, when we trained into Prague, because you're supposed to do it where you arrive. So definitely just paperwork is my big tip. Make sure all of your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted. And then for our dog, we did get her some anti-anxiety medication from the vet. It didn't seem to make a huge difference from what I could tell. We sort of had her trying it out a few days before we left. I didn't notice a difference, but I think it was more, maybe it was just like a placebo effect for us. If we had it on hand, we felt better. But she was a champ. We've never done that sort of long traveling with her before, but the flight from Vancouver to Paris is about 9 hours. And then there was all of the time in security, before and afterwards, where she wasn't able to use the bathroom. So I think she ended up holding it for like 14 hours or something like that, which is incredible. And we had put down a little, pee pad in her crate in case she needed to go. We were like, okay, no problem. But she was fine. She just curled up and fell asleep. And held it until we got to Paris and we got outside, and she was happy, which is
Zanne, what do you
surprising.
think Molly would think about all this? Is Molly ready for this?
So Molly had to travel in cargo when we relocated from Chicago to LA. I was already out here in LA living for about 8 weeks. And then my husband and the girls flew out with her. That's a whole other story because the flight was delayed for like 6 hours.
Oh.
And then by the time that they landed and then they had to travel to go get her, like they were so worried about her but they went in and she's like running around the offices and they're all giving her treats. They're all like, oh, this is the best dog.
Yeah.
I do have another story though. When I had to travel with my cat, when I relocated by myself. So first of all, I used to make fun of everybody who would bring their pets in the carriers and slide them under the seats.
Yeah.
And now that was me. I have this black cat under the seat in front of me and she's crying the whole time. So I'm getting all the dirty looks, right? And we had a layover in Vegas. So Anya calls me. She goes, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm in McDonald's in Las Vegas with the cat trying to feed her a tranquilizer. In the airport, and I have the carrier open with this like little tiny pill that I'm trying to force her mouth open to like put it down. And I'm carrying all my luggage, and like the other plane that we have to get on to get to LA is boarding, and I'm trying to. It was an adventure. I mean, you want to talk about an adventure?
Zanne, I think the problem was you must have bought the unhappy meal.
Yeah. So when you talk about teaspoon of adventure, one of mine is, taking a cat to McDonald's in Vegas. So
it's a good one.
Yeah.
So, okay, Riana, you have traveled and worked and lived and volunteered all around the world. Here's a tough question for you. What are your top 6 continents? Go.
Making me feel bad I haven't got that 7th one. Oh, boy.
So what is the 7th? I'm guessing probably Antarctica. That's
Antarctica.
a little chilly. Yeah. Even
that's
somebody from Canada, right?
It's tough. Yeah, it's very expensive to get there. And then the traditional way of going is like the boat through the Drake Passage, and I get horribly seasick. So just the money and the seasickness is really making that a difficult one for me. But one day.
Yeah. So you traveled to all these different continents. I think you were doing some volunteer work, right? Like that was part of your adventure. Like tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I had done a volunteer placement in Peru in my second year of university, and that was my first time to South America. And it was a cool program. It was cool. We lived with a local family in Lima. This was back in my very stingy backpacking days. There was an opportunity to hop a flight to Cusco and see Machu Picchu, of course, what you do when you're in Peru. But I was like, oh no, that's far too expensive. I can't do that. So I was still kicking myself for that. I'll have to head back to Peru. And then I had done an internship, sort of, I guess, you could call it volunteering through my school, through my university in Swaziland. And I did that for about 3 months. Also living with the host family and helping out in a sort of not quite an orphanage setting, but like a foster home sort of setting, working with the psychology team there, which is what I studied at university. So that was sort of another volunteer experience that took me around the world, which is really cool.
That's so awesome.
So one of the things too that a person would notice when they are reading your blog and getting to know you is I think you use the blog as a way to travel remotely? I mean, I sensed that maybe that's kind of where it started for you as I was reading on your site there. How has that come into play in the last 12 months or so? I mean, are we traveling remotely now? And how does that compare to really being able to travel? I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's keen observation. That's definitely when I first started the blog in 2012. That's totally what it was. I was writing it probably 3 a.m. from my university dorm room, and I just had this huge sense of feeling really trapped and stuck physically. Just not able to leave university at that time, being in my small little dorm room, but also just sort of larger. What am I doing at school? What am I studying? What's the point? How can I get out of here? So definitely the blog sort of became that first escape, that first outlet. Let me, look back at past travels, but let me also sort of dream of future ones. And I can definitely feel that coming back through this last, 10, 11 months of pandemic time now. Definitely using the blog as a way to escape and sort of, look back on past travels, I guess, sort of remotely going through my memories and going back and remembering all the wonderful trips I have had, as well as sort of looking ahead. Okay, what trips do I want to go on? I've been doing a lot of travel planning just in, it's a hobby of mine. I love to plan out trips. I always have, 3 or 4 trips in the works at any given time, mapping out itineraries, finding restaurants, all that sort of thing. I love to do it. And that's definitely been something that sort of helped me through the pandemic. Doesn't compare to actually getting to go on the trips, but it's helped. It's been a lot of fun.
So when you're planning these trips, because you mentioned you'd like to go for extended periods of time and actually live overseas, like how does one, because it's very different than planning a vacation. How do you go about trying to decide where to live? And you talked a little bit about picking the country, but then how do you figure out, because you're not there. It's not like you can go and look at the houses or check out the neighborhoods or anything along those lines. How do you figure that out?
Yeah, so for Prague, the way we narrowed it down just from the Czech Republic to Prague was when we were getting those recommendations, people were saying Prague specifically. And that was actually kind of nice because when we were looking at, France or Germany or Spain or Italy, any of the other countries we could have got a visa to, it then became, okay, we've picked the country. Now we need to narrow it down to the city because there's so many cities where we could live, where there are people who speak English, where there are international airports, yada, yada, yada. Whereas in the Czech Republic, it really was just Prague. Like if we wanted my partner to be able to get a job where he only needs to speak English, if we wanted to be able to travel, with the international airport and a train station, and we wanted to have those connections, it had to be Prague. So that was actually one of the cool things about picking the Czech Republic for our visa. It narrowed it down right away to the city, which was a little scary because it was kind of like, if we eat Prague, too bad, we're, SOL, we're stuck kind of thing. I guess we could have tried to apply for another visa, but it would have been difficult. So that helped us narrow down the city. And then in terms of the actual housing, what I did was I just joined a bunch of Facebook groups for expats in Prague, and people had listings for different apartments. And our plan had always been to get an Airbnb when we first arrived for, the first few weeks, first month, while we sort of did the house hunt on the ground. And I had only joined those groups just to get an idea of, okay, what do houses look like? How much do they cost? What are neighborhoods, that have some English speaking people or good transportation, that sort of thing. And we happened to see an apartment, probably 2 months before we arrived, that fit all our criteria. It was in the neighborhood we were looking for, and they didn't want anyone to move in until we were getting there. So I was like, oh, that kind of works out perfectly.
Yeah.
And everyone told us like, oh, there's no way you'll find an apartment ahead of time. Like the rental market in Prague is so busy. You have to be here. You have to make an offer on the spot. They'll never rent it to an expat online. But they did. It worked out great. I reached out to the realtor. He kind of did like a video tour on his phone, and I was like, yep, checks out. I did a little Google search on him to make sure he was legit and we weren't sending our money off to nobody. But we still kind of had that thought when we arrived. But yes, we ended up securing the apartment about 2 months before we showed up, which was just such a huge load off. Traveling there, having never been to the city or the country before, traveling with our dog, and I think we had like 4 suitcases with us. It was so nice to just show up and be like, okay, done. Like the house out is done. But we did have the thought as we were just crossing the final bridge into Prague. My partner looked at me and he's like, what if this apartment doesn't exist? Like, what if this was just a scam? And I was like, oh my God, what if it was a scam? It was like 11 p.m. We had been on trains all day long. And I was like, oh, please let this be real. But it was the exact same apartment we saw in the pictures. So it worked out. It worked out really well. But we were prepared to sort of do the house hunt when we got there if we needed to.
Riana, I'm going to pull up your Twitter page, all right? Your Twitter account here. And my question is, or really what I would love for you to do is make an invitation to the people who aren't already following you. What do they get when they follow Teaspoon of Adventure, when they go to your blog? What are they going to find there, and what's your invitation to them?
Oh, thank you. I would say you're going to find lots of great travel stories that seem accessible if you can't give up your job or you're not looking to do really extreme hiking or other physical feats. You're also going to see a lot of books, as you'll see in that pinned tweet. Sort of a transition I took my blog in this last year with less travel was to sort of indulge my other passion of reading. So if you're into reading, there'll be lots of book recommendations. You'll see, I think I try to interact on Twitter. I do share some of my own blog posts, but I also really love the community on Twitter. That's my favorite part of it. It's the most, I know not everyone feels this way about Twitter, but I really do feel that it's the happiest social media platform. Everyone I interact on there with is so positive, so uplifting. There's genuine connections, whereas I don't feel that as much on some other social media platforms. It feels very self-serving, people sort of only commenting just to put their own name out there as opposed to actually have a conversation. So I think if you follow me and you engage with any of my tweets, you're gonna get engagement back. I am very happy to have a conversation. I want to know what's on your bucket list. I want to read your blog. I want to share your blog because I think that's kind of cool for my followers to see that it's not just all my own stuff. Like I love promoting other people's blogs and photos and tweets. Good little collection of books and travel there, and then some offhand tweets if I happen to watch an episode of 90 Day Fiancé I want to tell you about. That'll probably show up on there too.
That's quite a list of books. Is that because of the pandemic, or are you just an avid reader?
Yeah, it's actually right before we moved to Prague, I went and bought myself an e-reader because I had been saying for years, oh, I really want to get into books. I want to get into books. And then just never did. Like I would buy one book and, forget about it. And then I joked I'd been working on the same book for 3 years, which is true. It took me 3 years to finish a book. And then as soon as I bought that e-reader, I read like 6 books in the first month. And I was like, whoa, like this is so practical. It fits in my purse. And especially because we were moving to Prague, I was like, oh, I don't know what it's going to be like to try to get English books. Like, I don't know if they have, and they do have an English library and English bookstore, so it would have been okay. But it's just so much easier to have it right in my hands. And it was so perfect for traveling. I always would say my favorite time to read is on a train because we've got these, 5-6 hour train trips to wherever we're going. And the Wi-Fi is like not quite steady enough for, work or watching movies or anything. So it was always the perfect time. I would just sort of curl up in my chair, open up my e-reader, finish a book while looking out at the scenery. So it was definitely something that started while we were in Prague that sort of reignited my love for reading. And then since the pandemic, definitely been reading a lot more just with not much else going on.
Well, Riana, it has certainly been awesome to get to know you and to learn more about your passion for travel. And I think we've just only scratched the surface. So my advice would be for people to, if they aren't already following you, to follow you on Twitter, and we can look, they'll be able to find you at TSP Adventure, or just search for Teaspoon of Adventure. And you can also go online, teaspoonofadventure.com, get to know Riana. And yes, as I was looking at the website there, you have your content, but you're also sharing the content of other people and helping to tell other people's stories. You're very articulate. You're a great writer. And I think people are going to enjoy traveling with you even before the pandemic is over, but then especially as the pandemic ends and we start getting back to something a little closer to normal and traveling more. They've got to follow your adventures as they unfold in the near future. So Riana, again, thanks for joining us for Wander to the Edge.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. It was so nice to chat, very indulgent to chat about myself and my stories. And thank you for the kind words about my blog and my Twitter account. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, we are so happy to have you. And thanks for taking time to stop by and see us. And we invite you all to join us every Saturday. Wander to the Edge.